The wind screamed like a tortured soul, shrieking through the jagged black cliffs of the island, a forsaken speck of rock off Iceland's frozen coast. It didn't whistle nor sigh, it howled like a banshee. It wailed through the empty vastness of the sea. Waves dark like spilled ink, they crashed violently against the stone, their endless fury matched only by the torment within these cursed shores. Above the pale moon hung like a sliver of bone, a watchful eye over the mist-choked field below. The land lay breathless, frozen in eerie silence except for the restless wind and the relentless sea. A thin mist curled over the earth, creeping like grasping fingers of the dead. A lone Viking stood watch, his breath foggy in the bitter air, chest rising and falling. Steady defiance, his grip tightened around the hilt of his sword, knuckles white. Something was out there, not the shifting shadows, not a foraging beast, something neither dead nor alive. The night was thick with silence. The Viking stood frozen, his breath quick, his grip tightening around his sword. What lingered in the mist was dark. It had a shadow, it had a form. It was present, and it breathed as it stood. To understand this fear, we must leave the haunted island for a moment and step back into the world of the Norse. Their beliefs, their battles, their unshakable certainty that death was not always the end. Imagine a world where the dead did not rest, where warriors could return, not as legends but as something much darker. For the Vikings, life and death were merely two sides of the same blade. Restless dead, wandering spirits, and unseen forces. Those were not mere legends to Vikings, but accepted truths, shaping and influencing every battle, every burial, every whispered prayer to the gods. They knew that some souls bound by hatred or greed did not pass on to Valhalla or Hell's embrace. These were the restless dead, the ones who refused to stay buried. But what were they? And more importantly, how did one avoid becoming what they feared? The Vikings lived and died by one measure: honor. A man's worth wasn't counted in silver or land, but in his name, carved into the memory of those left behind. Die well and your deeds were sung in the mead halls for generations. Die in disgrace, well, let's just say you'd be lucky if anyone remembered your name at all. The Norse didn't fear death, they feared a meaningless death. No warrior wanted to rot in the ground, forgotten, or worse, linger on as something cursed. Honor meant everything. It was the golden ticket to Valhalla, Odin's grand hall of endless feasting where mead flowed like a river and warriors spent eternity fighting and feasting. A perfect balance of violence and indulgence, much like a good Viking on the weekend. But dishonor, that was a fate worse than hell itself. According to the Vikings' code of wisdom, cattle die, kinsmen die, you yourself must die. But one thing never dies: the fame of the dead man's deeds. In other words, your actions outlived you, so you better make sure they're worth remembering. Otherwise, you might end up like Grettir from the Saga, who was such a nasty piece of work in life that when he died, he refused to stay put. His corpse sat upright in his burial mound, murdering anyone who came near. Real charming fellow. Grettir wasn't alone. The sagas are full of stories of men so greedy, vengeful, and dishonorable that even death couldn't get rid of them. These were the restless dead, cursed to walk the earth long after their time had passed. So how did one avoid such a fate? How did a Viking ensure they didn't rise from the grave, pale-eyed and hungry for vengeance? That's where things get interesting. The answer was simple, yet not so simple. Live well, die well, most importantly, stay dead. Vikings took every precaution to ensure the dead remained where they belonged. Burials were not just ceremonies, they were safeguards. A proper send-off wasn't about making the deceased comfortable, it was about making sure they didn't come back. The sagas tell of warriors burned in their ships, the wealth sent with them to the afterlife. This wasn't just about status, this was a form of insurance. If a man had all he needed in death, why would he crawl back for more? But for those who weren't so lucky, things got grim. Take Glamr from the Grettir saga, a man so ill-tempered in life that when he died, he returned even worse. No burial rite could keep him down because he became what Vikings feared most. He became a draugr. Swollen, dark, and seething with malice, he roamed the countryside, ravaging flocks and terrorizing men with the strength to crush bones and the power to curse with a mere gaze. No one wished to cross paths with such a vengeful creature. To prevent such horrors, Vikings took drastic measures. Bodies were bound, buried face down, even staked through the chest with iron rods, just to be sure. Sub-legends even speak of beheading the dead or breaking their legs, ensuring they couldn't walk the earth again. But was this all just superstition? Remember, these were the same people who believed in giant wolves swallowing the sun and world-ending serpents coiling beneath the sea. Superstition or not, the Norse took no chances when it came to the dead. They had seen too much, heard too many stories, and lost too many lives to ignore the restless ones. Those who clawed their way back from the grave, refusing to be forgotten. Across the sagas, one thing is clear: if a draugr rose, it had to be stopped, and the methods were as grim as the creatures themselves. It was better to keep the dead comfortable, lavish treasure, food, and weapons to keep them content in the afterlife. But if a man was feared in life, he would be feared even more in death. His burial would be anything but honorable. When a draugr rose, there was no negotiation, no reasoning, no mercy. It was a threat that had to be dealt with swiftly, before its hunger spread like sickness through the land. Unlike ghosts of latter folklore, the draugr was physical, a walking corpse of immense strength, immune to normal weapons, and utterly relentless. So what did the Vikings do when one returned? If a draugr was terrorized in a village, the first step was always battle. But this wasn't an ordinary fight. A draugr did not bleed, it did not tire, and it could shatter bones with his bare hands. Blades often failed against them. Only the strongest, bravest warriors stood a chance. Some sagas tell of heroes wrestling the draugr, using brute force to overpower it. Others speak of warriors using fire-hardened stakes to pin the creature to the ground. But if physical combat failed, more extreme measures were needed. If a draugr couldn't be bested in combat, the Vikings turned to rituals of destruction. These weren't mere burials, they were exorcisms of flesh and fire. Burning the body was the most effective method. A draugr reduced to ash could no longer rise. Dismemberment, chopping off the head, severing the limbs, breaking the bones, anything to make sure it stayed dead. Driving iron through the corpse, Vikings believed iron had special power against the supernatural. A spear, sword, or even nails driven through the draugr's chest could pin him to the grave. The most terrifying draugr were never alone. Perhaps the most chilling belief: one draugr could create more. It was said that if a draugr was left unchecked, its presence could taint the land, spreading disease, madness, and even rising others from the dead. This is why it had to be stopped quickly. If one village failed to act, they might all be swallowed by the curse, and no one knew this better than those who lived in the shadow of Glamr. The villagers had tried everything. They avoided his burial site, whispered prayers to the gods, and barred their doors at night, hoping the creature wouldn't come for them. But the dead do not respect walls, they do not bargain, and they do not grow weary. Glamr had become more than a mere corpse returned. He was a force of terror, stalking the hills at dusk, crushing men in their sleep, turning the bravest warriors into cowards before they even laid eyes on him. Glamr was feared long before he became a draugr. A man of great strength, but foul temper, he was known for his wild ways and reckless defiance of the gods. Unlike most Vikings, who honored the old ways, Glamr had no patience for prayers or rituals. He mocked the customs, refused to fast before Yule, and he scorned the protection that others sought from the gods. Some called him cursed even in life. Then came the fateful night. Glamr had taken up work as a shepherd, tending flock in the harsh Icelandic winter. One evening he did not return. When the villagers searched for him at dawn, they only found blood on the snow, wolf tracks circling like vultures over a fresh kill. But they never found a body, not at first. Then on the third day, he was back. His corpse, swollen and dark, laid sprawled in the valley, his face twisted in a grotesque mask of terror. No one knew it had killed him, but the fear in his dead eyes told them one thing: it had not been wolves. The villagers buried him as quickly as they could, but they had waited too long. Whatever had taken Glamr had cursed him, and now he would never rest. Glamr had risen, and he was hungry. By the time Grettir the Strong arrived, the land was already poisoned by fear. The village sat in a deathly hush, the kind of silence that comes when people are too afraid to speak of what haunts them. Doors remained bolted long before sunset. Hearths were left cold, and no one dared to tend their flock beyond midday. The people, they were warriors, farmers, survivors of harsh winters and long battles, yet here they cowered like hunted prey. Something was out there, something they refused to name. Grettir heard the rumors before he even set foot in the village. A cursed thing lurked in the hills, once a man, now something worse. It crushed livestock, tormented the living, and turned even the bravest men into trembling shadows of themselves. The villagers begged him not to go, not to seek it out. But Grettir was no ordinary man, and if this creature refused to stay buried, then Grettir would put it down himself. The hunt for Glamr had begun. Grettir wasted no time. He listened to the stories, he measured the fear in the villagers' eyes, and he rode straight into the hills where no one else dared to go. The shepherd's valley was eerily still, the kind of silence that did not belong in the living world. The ground was frozen hard, the last light of day bleeding over the horizon like an open wound. Grettir could feel it before he saw it, the weight of something unnatural pressing against the air, thick as the coming night. Then, at the mouth of the valley, he found it, Glamr's burial mound. It had been torn open from the inside. Grettir knelt, running his fingers over the frozen dirt, and smirked. Not even the grave wants him. The sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows stretched long and hungry across the valley. And then, the first sound, a deep, ragged breath. Not the wind, not an animal, something waiting. Grettir stood slowly, rolling his shoulders, flexing his fingers around the hilt of his sword. "Come on then," he muttered, voice steady as steel. The night had come, and so had Glamr. Grettir did not move. A man who flinched was a man who died. He had faced beasts before, he had slain men in battle, crushed bones with his bare hands, but this was different. This was not a beast, this was not a man. Then, from the darkness he saw it. Glamr stood at the edge of the valley, a towering figure, bloated and blackened in death. His eyes, pale and burning with cold fire, locked onto Grettir, was something worse than rage, hunger. His skin was stretched too tight, his body twisted by the grave's embrace. He should have rotted, he should have withered away, but instead he had grown stronger, and then he moved. Not rushed, not wild, but with the slow, confident steps of something that knew it could not be stopped. Grettir tightened his grip on his sword, his muscles coiled, every instinct screaming for him to strike. But then Glamr spoke. "You'll never know peace." The words should have meant nothing, but they did. A weight settled into Grettir's chest, something cold and ancient, something he could not shake. Glamr was smiling. Then the draugr lunged. The fight was on. Grettir had fought against giants before. This was worse. Glamr was not fast, but he did not need to be. He moved with the slow, crushing weight of a nightmare made flesh. His strength something beyond human, beyond natural. Grettir's first blow struck true. His sword bit deep into the draugr's side, but no blood came. Instead, the wound gaped black and empty, as if the blade had cut into shadow itself. Glamr lunged. Then he struck. The blow came like a falling tree, unstoppable. Grettir barely raised his shield in time before the sheer force sent him skidding backwards, boots digging trenches in the frozen earth. For the first time in years, Grettir felt it. Fear. Is this it? He thought, shaking the numbness from his arms. Is this where my saga ends? No, not tonight. With a roar, Grettir lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the draugr's chest, slamming him back into the hillside. They crashed together like wild beasts, tumbling into the snow, fists hammering, bones cracking. Glamr's hands clasped around Grettir's throat. For the first time in his life, Grettir felt his strength falling. No blade could kill this thing. No shield could stop him. And then, through the swirling snow, Grettir saw the sky, the stars, the light, and then he remembered what Glamr feared most. With every ounce of his remaining power, he wrenched free from the draugr's grip, his hands shooting forward, not for his sword, not for his axe, but for Glamr's cursed, staring eyes. He pressed his thumbs deep into the creature's pale, burning gaze, and the night itself seemed to scream. Glamr's body seized, his grip slackened, and for the first time, fear filled the eyes of the dead, because the light of the heavens had given him power. With one last desperate cry, Grettir threw the monster down onto the frozen earth. Glamr's body convulsed once, twice, and then lay still. The draugr was slain, but as Grettir staggered back, his chest heaving, his vision blurring, Glamr's voice rasped up from the void one last time. You'll never know peace. You will be hunted, hated, and alone to the end of your days. A curse. Grettir had won the battle, but the war for his soul had only just begun. The valley was silent now. No more laughter, no more shifting weight in the dark. Glamr was gone, but his words remained. Grettir staggered to his feet, his breath ragged, his body aching, his hands trembled, not from fear, but from what was said. He had killed the creature that could not die, and yet the victory felt hollow. The villagers would rejoice, the land would breathe again, the night would no longer belong to the dead, but Grettir himself, he had paid a price. You will never know peace. You will be haunted. You will be hated until the end of your days. A coldness settled into his bones, something deeper than exhaustion, something he could not shake. He was no stranger to battle, but this was different. He could still feel Glamr's burning gaze in his mind, as if the draugr had left something behind, a mark, invisible yet unshakable. He glanced up, the stars still shone. The sky had not changed. The world had not ended, but his world had. He had won, and yet he had lost. He lost something far greater, because from this night forward, Grettir would walk a road without rest, without home, without peace. He would live as the greatest warrior of his time and die as the most cursed man to ever walk the land. Grettir the Strong stood alone in the dark, facing the unknown. He did not know what would happen, whether he would live or die, whether the battle was one he could win, but he stood anyway. That is what it means to be a Viking, not just in name, but in spirit. It's the courage to face what others run from, the resolve to carve your own path, even when the road is treacherous. The willingness to stand, not because you know who will win, but because some battles must be fought. So, my friend, what does this saga have to do with you? Let's be honest. You may not be wrestling with a draugr in the hills of Iceland, but that doesn't mean you don't have your own battles to fight. Maybe it's that project you've been putting off. Maybe it's the fear of stepping into something new. Maybe it's the voice telling you that you're not strong enough, not good enough, not ready. Sound familiar? Grettir didn't wait until he felt ready. He didn't wait until the odds were in his favor. He walked into the darkness knowing it would cost him, but knowing he had to stand anyway. And that is what we, in the spirit of the Vikings, can take from this tale. Every single one of us faces a draugr. It may not have glowing eyes and a body blackened with death, but it stands between you and where you want to go. It's that fear, that hesitation, that thing that you've avoided for far too long. And like Grettir, you have two choices. Turn away and let fear grow stronger and live in its shadow. Or stand firm, grip your sword, or your laptop, or your gym shoes, or your dreams, and take it head on. You don't have to be fearless to fight. You just have to fight. And when you do, when you push through, when you wrestle that draugr and you throw it to the ground, you'll find something powerful on the other side. You'll find yourself. So what's your battle today? What's the one thing that wants to own you? Face it, stand firm, and take your place among the warriors of old. And if you need a crew, well, you're in luck. Join the Viking Legacy and Lore Discord, where warriors of the same mind and spirit gather. Share your battles, your victories, your sagas, because no Viking fights alone. This is one of the first episodes, and I'm truly grateful that you took the time to listen. The goal is to build an amazing Viking community. Every Viking settlement began the same way. A handful of people standing on the shores of a new world, uncertain but determined. And in a way, that's exactly what we are building here. This podcast is a journey, a long ship pushing off into the unknown, a settlement rising from nothing but belief and hard work. It'll take time, it'll take commitment, but if you are willing to stand with us, to be a part of this growing community, then together we can build something incredible. A place where we don't just tell stories, we live them. Where we don't just learn history, we connect with it. And if you're ready to join us, you don't have to wait until the next episode. The doors to the hall are always open. Join the Viking Legacy and Lore Discord, where warriors, scholars, and storytellers gather. Discuss the myths, the legends, the truths behind the sagas, and be part of the crew as we grow the greatest Viking settlement. Not on a distant shore, but here in the minds and hearts of those who seek adventure. This is just the beginning. The question is, will you stand with us? If you've enjoyed this episode, leave a review, share it with a fellow warrior, and make sure to follow so you don't miss what's coming next. The sagas are only the beginning. And until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking within you.